Hello and welcome to this video series. In this video series, we are going to learn about Dapper. So let's start and first understand what is Dapper. Dapper is an open source object relation mapping library. We call it ORM library also, and it is basically used to map the C# objects to database objects. Meaning if you're getting some data from database and you want to map that data to your C# objects, you can use ORMs. So Dapper is also an ORM, and that is an open source, and this library allows developers quickly and easily access data from databases without need to write the tedious code. We will understand this with an example, but let's move on and see what Dapper can do for us. Dapper allows you to execute raw SQL queries, map results to objects, and execute stored procedures, and we can do other things also with it. And it is available as a NuGet package. On this slide, you can see some of the features of Dapper. Dapper is lightweight and fast, making it an ideal choice for application that requires low latency and high performance. It is very simple, but it is very powerful ORM that we can use with any .NET language such as C#, that enables developers to quickly and easily map query results from ADO.NET data readers to instances of business objects. We can quickly change our database result to our C# objects, or we can map our data to C# classes or C# lists. It has excellent support for both asynchronous and synchronous databases queries, and batching multiple queries together into a single call. Additionally, Dapper supports parameterized query to support help protect against SQL injection attacks. Basically, with Dapper, you can minimize the risk of SQL injection attacks in your website. So here is an example of code that we need to write without Dapper. Meaning, if we use a plain old ADO.NET code, what we need to do in that case. So you can, as you can see here, this code is quite long. And let's see what is happening here. First, we are declaring a SQL query. Then we are creating a list of product. And then we are creating a connection using a connection string. And then we are opening our connection and we are preparing a command. We are preparing an SQL command. To that SQL command, we are passing the SQL query and the connection. Once we have our command ready, we are executing that command using ExecuteReader. And once we have received the data in our reader, we need to write this many code to fetch the data from our reader to a product object. And finally, we are adding those products to our products list. So this is what we have to do if we are not using Dapper. But let's see how Dapper can help us to minimize this code. Basically, with Dapper, we can just use one line of code and complete this whole mapping. We can call .query method and we can pass the object here, meaning which type of data we are receiving, and we can pass our SQL query within it, and finally convert that to a list using .toList method. Now let's go to Visual Studio and try to replicate this scenario. So what I have done here, right, I have created a table products in my DemoDB database. And after that, I have inserted some rows in my products table, right? And if I query my table, select star from products, I will get some 11 rows from it. And I have the product IDs, product name, and all other details are also available here. Now let's create an MVC project and try to get this data to our application using ADO.NET. So let's open up Visual Studio. Let's create a new project. I will select the MVC template, this one, where it says ASP.NET Core Web Application Model View Controller. So select this template and click on Next. Here you need to give a project name. So let me say Product Manager. And I will click on Next, and I will click on Create. Once you click on Create, your MVC project will get created. And guys, in this video series, we are going to focus only on Dapper. I'm not going to go in details in concepts of MVC application. Okay, so let's create a new controller. So I will right click on controller and I will click on add and I will say controller. I will say MVC controller empty and I will click on add. Here I will name my controller as product controller and I will click on add. Now let's add a connection string in our app settings so that we can connect to database and fetch the data. So I have added my connection string here. This is my host name. This is my database name. Now let's come back to our product controller. Here, let's create a class product. So let me open up the models folder. Right click on this and click on add and add a class. I will name it product. Okay, now add the properties which will be same as the table columns. So basically we need to add these columns as properties in our product class. So I have added all the properties here, and make sure guys you are adding the property name same as the column name which is specified in the table. Okay, once that is done, now let's go back to Visual Studio, go to your product controller and create a constructor here and inject the I configuration and create a connection string variable here so that we can get the connection string from the configuration, and finally get the connection string in the constructor. So I have used get connection strings method and I'm getting the default connection. Right, now we have our connection string. Now let's add a view that will show us the list of products. So right click on your controller and click on add view. Here you need to select the second option, that is razor view, and click on add. Here you need to select which kind of view you want to create. So I want to create a view with template of list because I want to render the list of products, right? Here let's select the model, like I want to fetch products, right? So I will select product class here and click on add. Okay, our view is created. Now let's go back to our controller class. Here now let's fetch the data from database and send it to this view. First let's create an SQL query. Okay, so this is my SQL query. Now let's create a list of products in which we will store our products. Now let's create an SQL connection, and to create an SQL connection you need to install some package that is nothing but the SQL client. So right click on dependencies and select manage NuGet packages. Here you need to go to browse and search for SQL client, and you can select the first one, microsoft.data.sql client. Click on that and click on install. Now package is installed in your project. Now I can create a connection, and within the connection we need to pass the connection string that is nothing but that we have declared here. Our connection is ready. Now we need to open this connection. Once connection is open, you need to create an SQL command. So let's create the SQL command, and in the command you need to pass two parameters. One is the SQL query that you want to execute, and second one is the SQL connection. So we have the SQL connection here. Okay, so now our SQL command is also ready. Now let's execute this command using ExecuteReader method. So I am using ExecuteReader to execute this command, and once we have executed this command we will get all the data in the reader, and basically we need to iterate through the reader and get all the products one by one. So let's write that logic to get all the data from this reader. So here is the code. Here I am iterating through the reader and creating a new product object and adding that product in the products list. Once product list is ready, I can send this product list to my view. And you can notice here how I'm getting the data from the reader. I need to specify the column name, and based on that I need to get that particular property. So if I have 10 columns, I need to specify that code mapping 10 times and then I will get the data. As you can already see, this is a bit tedious, but don't worry, in some time we will install Dapper in our project and we will reduce this piece of code. But first see if this piece of code is working or not. Let's run this application. Our application is running. Now let's navigate to product controller. You can see I am able to get all the products from my database on the screen, right? So our code is working, and this is the ADO.NET code. You can see so many things we need to do just to execute this simple select query. Now let's install Dapper in our project and try to eliminate this piece of code with just one line. Okay, so let's stop our application and right click on dependencies again and go to manage NuGet packages. Here, let's search Dapper this time. And you need to install the first package that has 431 million downloads. Click on install, and within few seconds, this will get installed. Now you have Dapper in your project. Now we can get rid of this code. Okay, so basically we need to create a connection first. And once we have our connection, what we can say, connection dot query, and I can specify which kind of data I'm expecting from my query. Because I'm expecting product data, so I will specify product here. And after that, I need to send my SQL query. So this is my SQL query. And after that, I can just use toList method to convert this data to a list. And now I don't even need this, right? Now you can see we have reduced our code to only these many lines. If I run my program now let's again navigate to product. You can see I'm getting the same data back, but this time we only have to write only these many lines. It is because of the Dapper. So using Dapper, you can reduce the amount of code that you have to write just to get data from database. And that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will continue our discussion and we will execute some different kind of queries with Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will see how we can fetch scalar values from database using Dapper. First of all, let's understand what are scalar values. Scalar values means single value. If I query my table products, you can see here I'm getting 11 rows here. So this is not scalar data. Scalar data means if I, let's say I want the count of products that are available in my product table and I'm using a count function here. If I execute this query, right, I am getting a single value that is 11. That is nothing but number of rows that are available, right? So scalar value means a single value that we are getting from a query. Other example can be like if I have a query that is returning the product which is the most expensive one. So if I say max, so I can say max unit price and execute this. So I will get 12. So this is the maximum price. So this is also a scalar value. Now let's go back to slides and understand what are the methods available in Dapper library to fetch scalar values. Okay, so basically there are four methods that are available. First one is ExecuteScalar. It will return the first column of the first row as a dynamic type, right? So what ExecuteScalar will do, if I have this query, right, and if we run this, you can see I'm getting 12 here. So what this will do, this will fetch the first value from the first row. So because we're getting 12 here, so 12 will be returned in ExecuteScalar method. And if I have something like select star from products, and if I do ExecuteScalar here, what will happen? It will look at the first row and it will look at the first column. So basically one will be returned by using ExecuteScalar. Let's go to Visual Studio and understand this with an example. Okay, let's open up the controller that we have created in the last video. That was product controller, right? And here we were executing this simple select statement. Now let's do one thing. Let's show the count of product also in this. Now let's change our view and add a placeholder where we can show the number of products that are available. Open up the views folder, go to product folder. Here open up index.cshtml file. And here at the top, let's add one h1 tag. There we will show the data. Okay, I have added one h1 tag and I'm getting the data from the view bag. Now let's get the count here by using Dapper. Create a query that will get the count. Now let's use our connection and execute this query. And if you hover over on the execute scalar, you can see it is returning an object type. Let's store that data in a variable and let's bind this count to the view back. And before running the program, let's change our default controller from home to product. So I will go to my program.cs, and here where we have defined the default controller, I will change it from home to product. Now let's run the application. You can notice here my program is running and I'm getting the count here as 11 because there are 11 products in my list. So okay, this is how you can use ExecuteScalar and get scalar values from database. Okay, now let's understand what is the use of the other methods that are available. Let's go back to slides. And on the slides, we can see the second one, which is generic type. Here we can pass t as the type. Basically, we are expecting an integer. So what we can do, we can change this execute scalar to integer type, right? And if you notice here, the count will become of integer type. It is no longer of object. So if I run the program again, right, we are getting the same count here, but this time we are making our method type safe, because if I say string here, right, I will get the compilation error because execute scalar is now returning integer and I cannot store that in a string variable. So this provides us type safety. Other two are same methods, but we can execute them in a synchronous way. So now let's see these also in action. So what we can do, instead of calling them synchronously, I can use a sync method here. And if you notice, we are getting the compilation error here because we need to put a wait here and we need to change our controller to a sync type. Let's change the return type to task of action result. Now if we run the application again, we'll get the same result, but this time we are using the asynchronous programming here and we are using the ExecuteScalar Async method. Then we can execute this particular method also. And guys, you can try this out on your own and see if you are getting the expected result or not. And we will conclude this video. In the next video, we will see how we can get data from a query which is returning a single row. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will see how we can query a single row using Dapper. Let's see what you want to achieve. If I run my application currently, we can see we are getting a list of products, and here we are printing the number of products that are available in the list. In the last video, we have fetched this single value or the scalar value using the ExecuteScalar method. In this video, we will see how we can get a particular row using Dapper. Okay, so what we want to do, when user clicks on details button, right, the user should navigate to that particular product. Meaning when I click on details here, I should be opening a page where I will see details of only organic apples. Okay, let's see how we can achieve this. To achieve this, actually we have multiple options in Dapper. We have multiple methods that we can use. First one is query single. This can be used only when one row is expected to be returned. If we are getting more than one row, it will throw an invalid operation exception if returns 0 or more than one row. So if you're using query single, you need to make sure your query is written like that. It is returning only one row. It should not return 0 rows and it should not return more than one row also. Second method is query single. This is basically the same method as above, but the only difference is this is a generic type and we can pass the type which we are expecting, and this will provide us the type safety also. Try to use this particular method and try to fetch a row. And before starting this, let's do one thing. Let's refactor our project. Basically, we should not be writing our database code in controller class. The best practice is to move the code in service and repository layer. So let's create some service and repository classes and refactor this code. I will add the required class files and folders, and then I will walk you through what I have done. Okay guys, let's see what I have done. I have basically added two folders. One is a repo folder that stands for repository. And here I have my product repo class, which is implementing product repo, iProduct repo. And basically all the database logic I have added in this particular class. Here only I am creating the connection and calling the Dapper library function query and getting all the products. So this is my get all method. And I also have one more folder that is services, and I have added product services class here, which is implementing iProduct service. Here I'm doing nothing but injecting the instance of iProduct repo and calling that get all method and basically returning the result back to the controller. So let's go back to controller and see what have changed. Here, instead of injecting iConfiguration, I am injecting the product service here. And basically, I'm using this product service to finally calling get all method. So now our classes looks more clean and we are following the single responsibility principle. Now, if I run my program, I am getting the same result as before. And one more thing, I have removed the count of products from here. We will implement that in future video. Okay. Now let's see what we wanted to do. We wanted to have this functionality. When user clicks on detail, I should be getting that one product row and show that on the screen. To achieve this, let's add particular methods. So I will be adding one method in my repo service get by ID. So basically this will take the product ID and return the product. Add the same method in iProduct repo also. Now here we can write our query and get that particular product. Select start from product where ID equal to ID. And now finally call the Dapper library. Let's invoke the query single method now. And I will use the generic method and I will specify the type which I'm expecting. So I'm expecting a product here. And within this, I will pass my SQL query. And also I need to pass the parameter because now our query is expecting a parameter of ID. So I will be passing the parameter ID here. That will be equal to the ID which I'm receiving in this method. Okay. And if we hover over on query single, you will notice we are getting the product type back. Now we can return this product like this. And now let's go to our product service class and call the method from the repo like this. And similarly, let's do the same thing in the controller. So in the controller, I will be creating a detail method which will be doing the same thing. It will be invoking product service class and it will be invoking get by ID and returning the product, and that will be sent back to the view. So now let's add the view also. I will right click on the action method and I will select add view. Here I will be selecting the razor view. I will click on add and this time I will select the template which says details and I will select the model as product. I will click on add and my view is added. Okay, one more thing we need to change because there is no ID column in our table. So I need to change it back to product ID. Query is fine now. Let's run the application again. Let's click on details and we're getting an runtime exception. Because if you check here, right, ID is coming as 0. We are not sending the correct ID. And if I query my table where ID is equal to 0, I am getting no rows. And if you remember what we were discussing, query single method will return an exception. Query single method will throw an exception if the query returns 0 or more than one row. That is what happening here. When we are running the application, we are getting this invalid operation exception. Now let's fix this issue and pass the ID to our action method properly. For that, what we need to do in our index.html class, we need to uncomment this piece of code. So basically on click of detail, I need to pass the ID of that product. So let's say ID equal to So I'm passing the ID now. Let's try to run the application now and see if it is working now. I will click on details and I'm getting the details of that particular product. I'll go back to the list and I will click on some other product. This time I'm getting that particular product. So our code is working fine. And we have successfully used query single method of generic type. There are other methods also to achieve the same thing. Let's see those also. This one, query single or default. This basically will do the same thing, but if there are no rows returned, it will not send the error. It will be used when 0 or 1 row is expected, right? But if query return more than 1 row, that time it will throw this particular exception. This is the same exception that we have seen earlier. So let's try to use this particular method. I'll go back and I need to change my repo class. So I will go to my product repo class. And here, instead of using query single, this time I will be using query single or default. And let's run the program again. You will notice I am getting the data. And if I click on any product, I will get the details of that particular product. Okay. And guys, if my query is returning 0 rows, you will notice we will not get any error. Let's say I will change my ID here to -1. So basically there is no product with ID -1 and we will return 0 rows from this query. And let's see what is the behavior after this. I'll click on details and you can notice we are getting blank values, but we are not throwing any exception. That is because if you remember on this slide, if the query has returned 0 rows, it will return a null. It will not throw the exception. Exception will be thrown if the query is returning more than one element. Let's try this case also. So within this query, like if I change my query something like this, product ID is greater than 5. And if I execute this, you will notice I'm getting 4 products here. So if I change my condition here, product ID is less than this, and change my ID here to 5, this time my query will return 4 products and the expectation is I will be getting a runtime error. Let's run the application and see. I'm running my application, I'm clicking on details, and again I got the invalid operation exception. That is because now our query is returning more than 1 row. So we have seen how query single or default will work. We have this method also, that is query first. It will return the first row as a dynamic type. It will return the exception if no rows are returned. Okay, so even if your query is returning multiple rows, this will fetch the first row from that result set, right? If you see here, right, currently our query is returning 4 rows. If I change my method to query first, let's see the behavior. Query first. And if I run my application now, and if I click on details, you will notice I'm getting the organic apples. I'm not getting the error. That is because when this query is running, it is giving us 4 rows and query first is picking up the first row and showing that in the result. And guys, if you see the slides, you can notice here we will get the exception if the query is not returning any data. So again, if I change my query to something like ID equal to -5, that time we are not returning any data. And if I change the same thing in my query also and pass the ID as -5 and rerun the application, we are getting the invalid operation exception. That is because now our query is not returning anything, right? So this was query first, and we also have query first or default. This method will never throw an exception. What this will do? This will simply return the first row as an instance of the type specified by the type T, or returns null if there are no result. So basically, if our query is returning more than 1 row, it will pick the first row. And if our query is not returning any row, it will send the null. And if our query is returning only one row, then of course it will send that particular row back. Okay, let's see this also in action. So currently my query is not returning any data, but let's change it to query first or default. Right, and run the application again. See, we have not received any exception. And if our query is returning more than one row, so let's change the condition again. Product ID is greater than 5. So if I go to my database and change the condition to product ID greater than 5, you will notice we are getting some 6 rows. So let's run the application. Clicking on details, you can see I'm getting broccoli. Now the same thing is happening here. The query is returning multiple rows, and query first or default is basically picking the first row from the result set. That's why we are seeing broccoli here, because this was the first row that was returned. And if I change back my query to the proper ID and run my application again, we can see our application is running as expected. I'm getting the product which I'm clicking on Swiss cheese, I'm getting Swiss cheese back. I'm clicking on tuna and I'm getting that particular product back. Okay guys, these were the methods that we can use to query single row using Dapper from the database. In this video, we have also seen how we can use parameterized query. Basically, in this query, you can see we are expecting an ID parameter and we are passing that ID parameter by using an dynamic object. So we are creating an object on fly and passing that object, and from this object Dapper will get that parameter and send it to database. So make sure guys, the parameter which you are showing here after at the rate, you need to use the same name in the dynamic object also. If you don't use the same name, let's say I change it to ID with 2 times D and run the application, we'll receive the exception. We're getting the SQL exception must declare the scalar variable at the rate ID. Okay. That's it for this video guys. In the next video, we will see how we can query multiple rows from database using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will see how we can query multiple rows using Dapper. But before doing that, in the last video, we have seen how we can query single rows. And guys, for querying single rows, we also have the async method that we have not discussed in the last video. So you can make use of these async methods if you want to write async programming. So this is the one thing that I wanted to highlight here because we have not discussed this in the last video. So now let's move on and see how we can query multiple rows using Dapper. To query multiple rows, there are 4 methods. One is query, second one is query of generic type, and third one is query async, and the fourth one is query async but with generic type. Actually, if you remember right, we have already used this method in our first video. If you remember in the first video what we have done, we have fetched these products from the database. And to fetch these products, what we have done, if I go to my repo class, you can see in my repo class, I am using a query method and I am using the generic type, and I was fetching all the products using this query method. Okay, and this was the query that we were firing. If I run my application now, this is the result that I'm getting. And what I want to do in this video, I want to see the products of a particular category. Let's say when I select this organic apples, this is having category 1, right? So when I select organic apples, I should be able to get all the products which are available in this particular category. Basically, I should be fetching all the items with category 1. Okay. And if I click the second row, which is having category 2, in that case, I should be fetching all the products of category 2. Okay. So implement this. Let's first add a link button here so that we can click on that and fetch the required data. To add a link here, let's go to our index.html page. So this is my index.cshtml page. And here, let's add one more link. Okay, now let's change the name to show products from this category. Name this method as get by category ID. And of course, we need to pass the category ID also. So let's pass the category ID here. So I'm passing the category ID using a dynamic object. Now if I run my application, you can notice we have the link here, products from this category button. So the first step is done. We have added the button to get the products. Now let's add the required code and fetch the particular product. Let's add a method in our repo class. So let me open my interface, and this time I will add a method that will return a list of product, and I will name it get by category ID. Implement this method in the repo class. So I'm in my repo. If you notice here, I'm getting the compilation error because I have not implemented that new method. So I will click on this button and click on implement interface. Now let's implement this method and add our logic. First of all, let's create an SQL query. If I go to my database and I see my products table here, and if I query this much, I get 11 rows. And if I want specific products, I need to specify category ID. Let's say category ID equal to 1. Using this query, I can get the products of category 1. So let's use this query. Okay, so I have added this, and I want to replace the category ID with the actual category ID. Basically, we will be using a parameterized query like we have done in the last video where we have passed down the product ID. Now we have the query. Now let's create an SQL connection. Now let's use this SQL connection to get the products. So I will say connection dot query, and I want to use generic type. So I am expecting list of products. So I will say product. And within this, I need to pass my SQL query, and I need to pass the parameter, which is nothing but the category ID. So I will again create a dynamic object, and I will specify the property name as category ID, and that will be same as the category ID that we are receiving in this method. Finally, store this result in a variable and return the result. If you notice here, I'm getting the compilation error because query will return an IEnumerable. So we need to convert this to list type. So what I can do, so I can use the toList method on top of this, and this will give us the list of products, right? So our repo layer code is done. Now let's add the methods in our service layer also. So I will go to my service layer. First, let's go to interface and add the method. Okay, so once the method is added in the interface, let's go to the actual service layer and add the method. Let's change the interface also because we have not specified the parameter in the interface. Let's add that parameter in interface also. Now we have our method available in service layer as well as in our repo layer. Now the final step, we need to invoke the method from service layer in our controller. So let's go to controller and add an action method. So I have added an action method here with name get by category ID. And here I'm invoking my method from the service layer and sending that result to the view. And basically this time we want to return the same view which we are returning from the index method. So what I can do, I can specify the view name here, index, and pass the data. And one more thing to notice here, if you remember in our index file, right, we have added this action method here, get by category ID. So we need to add the same method with the same name in our controller also, get by category ID. Once that is done, let's run our application. You can see here we have our button product from this category. So I am clicking on the first row where the category ID is 1. Let's click on this, and I'm getting all the products of category 1. Let's go back and select where we have category ID as 4. Click on that, and now I'm getting all the products of that particular category. We can go back again and click some other category. Let's say this time I will select category ID 3, and I got the products from category ID 3. Okay guys, that's it for this video. In this video, we have learned how we can query multiple rows using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will understand how we can query multiple results using Dapper. First, let's understand what do we mean by multiple result sets. So when I query this particular line, I'm getting one row. When I'm executing this query, I'm getting multiple row. So this scenario is basically which we have covered in the last video, where we have seen how we can query multiple rows. But in this video, we will see how we can query multiple results. Multiple results means two queries are getting executed one time and we are getting two result sets. One is for employee and second one is for employee address. So let's see how we can query multiple result sets using Dapper. I have created a table employee with these columns and I have inserted some rows in my employee table. Okay, so if I query my employee table, you can see I am getting 10 rows. And similarly, I have created one more table, employee address. And here I have added some addresses for the employees. And if I query my employee address table, you can see we are getting all the addresses. For this demo, I have created a new project. And in this project, we have the console application. And I have already installed the Dapper and SQL client package. And I have created two classes, employee.cs, with the same properties as the column that we have in the database. And similarly, I have the employee address class. Right. Now let's coming back to our program.cs. Here I am creating a connection string and I am creating an SQL connection. Now let's use Dapper and see how we can get multiple results. So basically I want to execute these two queries. To achieve this functionality right, we have QueryMultiple and QueryMultiple async methods. So we can use QueryMultiple method and get a grid reader. Once we have the grid reader, we can map the objects using it. Let's understand this with the demo. So first, let's write the SQL that we want to execute. Let's copy these two SQL queries and put it here. So this is the SQL that I want to execute, and this SQL will return multiple result set. Okay. Now to handle multiple result set, we have the method QueryMultiple, right? And I can pass my SQL here. And if I hover over on QueryMultiple method, you can see it is returning a grid reader. First, let's store the result of this in a variable. Now, once we have the grid reader, there are multiple methods in Dapper that we can use to map the objects. Let's go to slides and see those methods. So here is the complete list of methods that are available to read the data from the grid reader. So we have read first or default, read single, and read single or default. For different use case, we can use different method. And just like other Dapper methods, we have the implementation based on async and generic types also. From this result set, right, I want to query the first row. Let's use the data, and on data I can query read first, and I will be using the generic implementation. So I will pass the employee class here, and if you see the return type of read first, it is of employee type. So let's store this data. Now let's get the employee addresses. So let's create a variable employee address, and let's call data read because there are multiple rows. So I will be using the read method, and I will be specifying the class as employee address. See the return type now. So it is returning an IEnumerable of employee address. So now we have our employee and employee addresses. Now let's use console.writeLine and print the data. So I have added the console.writeLine. First I am printing the data of employee, and then I am using a for each loop and iterating through all the employee addresses and printing that also. Let's run our application and see if we are getting the expected result. So the application is running, and you can see we are getting one employee, that is Jane Smith, and we are receiving 5 addresses of Jane Smith here. And guys, one thing I want to mention here, this sequence in which you are getting the data from the grid reader is important because it should be same as you have written in your select statement. So first we are getting the data from the employee. That's why first I'm getting data from the employee, and then I'm getting data for the employee address, right? And if I change this sequence, let's say I'm getting the data for the employee address and then I'm getting the data for the employee, you will notice this will not work. If I put a breakpoint here and rerun the application, you can see here in the employee address, now I have one row, and you can see this is nothing but everything is null here. And you can see the employee also, in this also we have all the values as null, right? So the sequence in which we are getting the data from the grid reader is also important. It should match the sequence of the SQL query. Right? Let's change it back to the correct sequence and rerun the application. And now if you see, I'm getting the proper employee, Jane Smith, and I'm getting all the 5 addresses here, right? So the valid data is available now. And that's it for this video, guys. In this video, we have seen how we can query multiple results using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will understand how we can query specific columns using Dapper. If you look at the employee table is currently having employee ID, first name, last name, department, and salary. If I go to Visual Studio and check out the employee class, you will notice the properties that I have defined in the class are exactly same, which is mentioned in the table columns, right? But let's say I don't want to get data about last name. All I want is employee ID, first name, and their salary. For that, I can modify my query. Instead of saying select star here, I can put select employee ID, first name, and salary. And now you see we are getting only 3 columns here. So now let's see how we can get data only for the 3 columns in Dapper. I will go to my program.cs class. So let's get rid of this code. So this is the query I want to execute. So there is a mismatch between the columns that I am getting from the database and the properties that are defined in the class. Let's see the behavior, what will happen when I execute this query and map the data to employee class. So to execute this query, we need to use the query method. Once we have the employees, let's print those on the console window. Okay, so I have added the console.writeLine and I'm printing the employee ID, first name, and the salary. So these were the columns which we were getting from the select query also. Now let's run the program. You can notice I'm getting the employee ID, name, and salary of all the employees as expected. But if I put a breakpoint here and run my application again, and now if you check the employee IEnumerable here, let's right click on this and click on add watch. And now if you look at here, let's see the first object that we have here. So one thing you will notice here, I am getting all the properties here, but the values of those properties are blank or the default, because the default value for department is null. So that's why I'm seeing department as null here. And the default property for last name is also null because it is also string. So that is also getting set to null. So Dapper will smartly map only the properties which are available in the select query to your C# objects. For the properties which are not available in the select query, Dapper will simply set those values to null, or we can say it will set those values to their default value. Because if I remove salary from here also, right? Now let's see the behavior. Let's remove the salary from the console write line also. Let's run the program again. And this time, if you open your add watch, you can see in the employees object, the salary is getting set to 0 because salary is a number and the default value for that is 0. So this is how Dapper will react if you don't have the columns which are present in your class. The other scenario that we can discuss here, right? Let's suppose our query is sending some property. Let's say it is sending salary, and salary is not available in our employee class. Let me comment out this for now. Okay. Now, if I put a breakpoint here, now let's notice the behavior. What will happen? You can see here in our employees collection, we have all the objects. And if you see here, we are not getting any compilation error, and we have simply skipped the salary column which was coming from the database. In this way, Dapper is quite flexible and allows you to select the columns which you want to get from database. That's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will see how we can execute, insert or update queries using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will understand how we can perform insert, update and delete using Dapper. To execute commands like insert, update and delete, we can use execute method from the Dapper library. Execute can be used with any non-query commands. Insert, update, delete are just the example of some of the non-query commands. Non-query commands are those that are not intended to return any result set. It will just perform some operation on the database and come out of it without returning any result set. Execute method will return an integer. This is basically the number of rows that are affected by the successful completion of the command. Let's go to Visual Studio and understand this with an example. So this is my product manager application. This is an MVC application, and in this application, to demonstrate insert, update and delete, I have added some controllers. Let me explain what I have done, then we will start the demo. So to create new products, I have added a create controller here, right? And I have added a view also for this. If I go to my views folder, you can see I have views for create, delete and edit. So these are the three new views I have added here. So there are two action methods for creation. One will show the view where user will insert the data and we will create a new product in the database. And this particular action method will perform the actual creation of the product. And this is for the updation of the product. So I have named it as edit. So basically the first controller will take the product ID and render the view where user will edit the product. And once the product is edited and user will click on submit, then this particular action method will be called, and this will take the product and update that to the database. And same thing is happening for delete also. But if you notice, for the delete, I am using a different name because for getting the view to delete and to perform the actual deletion, we only need the product ID. Because of that, parameters in both the methods are same. So we cannot use two methods with same parameters in same class. That's why I have changed the name little bit. I am calling it delete product. And similarly, I have added these methods in my service class. So let's first go to the service interface. You can see I have added these three methods: create, edit and delete. Similarly, in the repo interface also, I have added these three methods. Let's see the product repo class also. So in the product repo class, I have added these three methods, but I have not provided the implementation of these three methods, and that we will be doing as part of this demo. First of all, let's run the application and see the current state of the application. So my application is running, and when I click on create new button, it will open a view where I can provide product name, supplier ID and all other details. And if you notice, I cannot provide the product ID because product ID will be generated at the database side. Let's go back. And when I click on edit button, it will open up an edit view. Here I can edit any property that I want, and I can click on save and it will update the product. Okay, now let's go back. And when I click on delete, it will open up the product details, and here I have a delete button. Clicking on this, I should be able to delete this. Currently, the delete, update and create will not work because we have not implemented our product repo class. So now let's go ahead and provide the implementation for these three methods. So we will start with the create method first. So let's first write the SQL that we want to execute. So this is the SQL that I want to execute. This is an insert query. So I am saying insert into products. I am mentioning all the column names, and then I am saying the values that I want to insert, and I am adding those values as a parameters here. So this is also gonna be a parameterized query. Okay, so next step is create an SQL connection. Our connection is also ready. Now execute the insert command using the execute method. So I will say connection dot execute, and I will pass down my SQL query here. And after this, I need to pass down the parameters. Parameters will come from the product object. So let's do that. Okay, so I am passing all the products which were mentioned here, and I am passing the values of those parameters here. And guys, if the name of the parameter that you're passing is same as the object property, then you no need to specify the parameter name explicitly. You can just remove that and directly pass the property. So let's do that for all the properties here. By doing this, we have simplified our syntax. Okay, now let's test this out. I will run my application, and let's do one thing. Let's put a breakpoint once we are in the create method. Okay, so the application is running. I will click on create new. I will provide some data here. So I have added the data. Let me click on create. Once I click on create, I am in the create method, and if you see, I have received the product object and all the values are available here. Now let's go ahead and continue this and execute the insert command. I will click on continue, and if you notice, I have my new product here added with all the values that we have specified there. So our insert command is working as expected. Now let's implement the edit functionality also. So when I click on edit, so I'm getting the product details back, and now let's go to the repo class and implement the edit method here. And again, first we need the SQL query to update the product. This is my SQL query, and this is also very straightforward. I am saying update products table, and I am setting all the column values here and passing the parameters, and I am specifying the where condition also, where product ID equal to the product ID that I will be passing here. Now let's create an SQL connection and execute this query as well. Here is my SQL connection, and I am executing my command again using the execute method. And if we hover over on the execute method, you can see it is returning an integer, which is nothing but the number of rows that are affected. So now let's run the application. Now let's try to edit our newly created product. So I will click on edit, and let's say I will change the name to my new product 2, and I will change the price also from 10 to 15, and I will click on save. Once I click on save, you can notice my product name is updated and my price is also updated, right? So our edit functionality is also working as expected. Now let's do it for the delete functionality also. So I will click on delete, and it is opening up the delete view. And if you see, we have not implemented the delete functionality. So let's implement delete also. First, write the SQL query. So this is my SQL query. I am saying delete from products table where product ID equal to the product ID that I am getting in this method. Now let's create the SQL connection. Once we have the connection, now we can execute the SQL query. So I can say connection dot execute. I will pass the SQL query, and the parameter in the dynamic object, I will say ID equal to the ID that we have received in this method. Once that is done, we can rerun the application, right? Our application is running, and let's click on delete. It is asking me, do you want to delete this product? I will click on delete, and you can notice my newly created product is now gone. So guys, this is how you can do update, insert, and delete using Dapper, and we can simply use the execute method, and we can pass the SQL query and the parameters if our query is taking any parameter. So that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will understand what is difference between buffered and unbuffered queries. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will try to understand what is the difference between buffered and unbuffered queries in Dapper. So let's understand what was happening when we were executing query from Dapper. So there was one database, right? and we had our application here. And from application, we were executing the query using the Dapper, and we were getting some rows back in the response. Earlier, when we were using the query method, that was executing the query in a buffered way. So what was exactly happening when we were executing the query? It will go to the database, fetch all the rows and bring it to the app server, and it will store in some memory. Okay, so this memory is nothing but is called buffer. Okay, so in this buffer, the result set will come, and from this buffer, the application will use the data, right? So what happened? Let's discuss again. We executed the query, we got some rows, and those all rows will come and get stored in the buffer memory, and from buffer memory, the application will use that data. Okay, so this was the buffered query. Now let's understand what will happen in case of unbuffered query. So again, we have our database, and again, we have our application. We will use Dapper and request our database to give us the rows. But in this case, instead of storing the data in the buffer memory, what we will do? We will keep the database connection open and we will get the rows as and when it is required, right? So if I require row number 1, then row number 1 will come. When I ask for row number 2, row number 2 will come. When I ask for row number 3, row number 3 will come. So it is kind of, we are streaming data from database, right? By using unbuffered query, we can save memory allocation. If you want to make your program more memory efficient, you can use unbuffered query. But the disadvantage of this is we need to keep our database connection open till we complete the reading from the database. So this was unbuffered query. So let's go back to slides and understand the other differences between buffered and unbuffered query. When it comes to querying database using Dapper, there are mainly two types of queries. One is buffered query and one is unbuffered queries. As we have understood, a buffered query retrieves all the rows from the data source at once into the memory. So it will store all the rows at once and store it in the memory, and memory is nothing but a buffer. Okay, while an unbuffered query will streams the results one by one as the next result is requested. Right? So it will stream the data. It will not get all the data at once. All queries are buffered queries in Dapper unless you define this attribute. So we can define buffered false if you want to do an unbuffered query. So let's go to Visual Studio and understand this with an example. Okay, so I have opened up my Visual Studio and here I have this console application. And here I have created one database connection and I have written the SQL query that is a simple select statement. I'm doing a select star from employee table. And if I go to my database and execute the same query, I'm getting 10 rows. So let's first understand the buffered query. As we have understood, all queries by default are buffered query. So let's say connection dot query and pass down the SQL query in this. Okay, and store the result in a variable. If you see this method right, this method is having one parameter that is a Boolean type parameter that is buffered, and the default value of this is true. Because of this, all queries by default are buffered query. But if you want to execute the query in non-buffered way, you can change that default value and set it to false. If you set it to false, the query will run in an unbuffered fashion. But for now, let's execute this with the default behavior. That is nothing but the buffered query. And let's use the generic type of this query. So I will specify the employee here. Now let's use the for each loop and iterate through all the data that we have received. So I am iterating through all the employees and I am printing the first name of the employee. Let's run this application and I'm getting all the employees and their first name. But let's say after executing it one time, after iterating through one time, I will close my connection. So what I will do, I will say connection dot close. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm iterating through the first object and then I'm closing the connection. Let's see the behavior in this case. Okay, you can see I am still getting all the 10 employee name here. That is because this is a buffered query. When we executed this query, the Dapper will get all the data and store it in the buffer memory. And from that buffer memory, we can access the employees object and print it. Even though our connection is closed, but still we are able to access the data because that data is available in the buffer. But let's notice the behavior when I change this query to unbuffered. So I will set the buffered parameter as false here. Now let's run the application and notice the behavior. Our application is running, and if you see on the console window, we have printed the first name John, but when we tried to iterate the second employee, the connection was already closed. That's why we received this runtime exception. That is nothing but an invalid operation exception. It says invalid attempt to read when reader is closed. So when we close the connection between the database and application was closed, and there was no data in our buffered memory because we have specified buffer as false. That's why we got the runtime exception. But if I remove this connection.close and run the application again, I will get all the employees back as expected. So this is the difference between buffered and unbuffered query in Dapper. And guys, I want to show you one more method that is available if you want to execute the query in unbuffered fashion. So instead of using the query, what you can do, you can use QueryMultiple method. And in this, you can specify the data that you are expecting. Because I'm expecting employee type data, so I will specify employee here, and I can pass my SQL query here. And if you see the return type of this is returning us an async enumerable of employee type. So we can do for each loop on this also. If you notice, we are receiving a compilation error here because this is of async type. So we need to put an await keyword here. Once I put the await keyword, the compilation error is gone. And now I can print the employee name. And now let's run the application. And I'm getting the expected result. So this is the one other way to execute query in an unbuffered way by using the QueryMultiple method. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will understand what is ExecuteReader method in Dapper. The ExecuteReader method is used to execute SQL query and retrieve the result as an iData reader. This allows us to read the data in forward only and read only stream. The ExecuteReader method is useful when you need to process a large set of data efficiently because it avoids loading the entire result set into the memory at once. Okay, so it will not load all the data into the memory at once. Instead of this, it will stream the data one by one. And from this, you will be thinking ExecuteReader is same as unbuffered queries, but that is not the case. In this video, we will also understand what is the difference between ExecuteReader and unbuffered queries in Dapper. First, let's see a demo and see how ExecuteReader will work. So I have opened up my Visual Studio and I have this query, select star from employee. So I will try to execute this query using ExecuteReader. On connection object, let's call ExecuteReader. So I have invoked ExecuteReader and I have passed down the SQL query to it. What it will return? It will return an iReader, meaning it will return us a reader. That reader we can store. To fetch the rows from reader, what we can do? We can say while reader.read. So reader.read will fetch the next available row. If the row is available, it will return true. If the row is not available, it will false. That's why we are using a while loop. We will be keep executing the logic within the while loop until we are out of rows. So this is the employee table that I have in my database, and you can see I have first name here and I have salary, and there are other columns also. But as part of this demo, let's just fetch the first name and the salary from this table. So when we have executed reader.read, our cursor is at the first row. So we are here. So on this row, I want to get the first name. First name is nothing but a string data type. So what we can say, I can say reader dot get string, right? If you notice, get string will take an integer. Basically, we need to tell the index of the column which you want to fetch. So the index of this column is 1. So we start from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can say 1 here also, but we should not do this. There is a way to get the index of the first name column, and to find that index, we can use reader dot get ordinal. So I will call get ordinal on this, and I will specify the column name. Okay, my column name is first name, so let me put it here. And now I can store this data in a variable. Similarly, let's do it for salary also. Because salary is of decimal data type, so I have used dot get decimal method here. Once we have the first name and salary, let's print that on console window. Let's run the program. You can see we are able to get all the 10 employees and their salary. So this is how basically you can use ExecuteReader method in Dapper. Let's go back to slide and understand some of the other features of ExecuteReader. So basically ExecuteReader can take these parameters. We have seen the first parameter, that is SQL, and this is a mandatory parameter. So this is basically the SQL query that we want to execute, and we can specify the stored procedure name also. Second parameter that it can take is param. If our query is parameterized, then we can pass the parameter using this. Third parameter is transaction. This is basically will be used if you want to use transactions when executing your query. Fourth parameter is command timeout. It represents the time in seconds to wait before terminating the command execution and generating an error. The default value of this parameter is 30 seconds, and this parameter is also optional. If your query is taking a lot of time and you don't want to wait for that query too long, you can specify the timeout period here, and after those many seconds, your query will be terminated and you will receive an error. The final parameter is command type. Using this parameter, you can specify how your SQL query or stored procedure should be interpreted by the data provider. The default value of this parameter is text. Now let's understand what is difference between unbuffered query and an ExecuteReader. ExecuteReader is a lower level approach. This gives us direct access to the data reader. Unbuffered query is kind of higher level approach. This provides us strongly typed objects. So guys, under the hood, when we are using unbuffered queries, it will actually use an ExecuteReader. Unbuffered query provide us an additional feature, that is object mapping. And object mapping is not available when we are using an ExecuteReader. If you see here, right, we have to explicitly get the column names. There is no mapping here. And if I have to map this data, right, to the object, what I have to do, I have to create a new object, and then I need to assign this value to that object. Okay, so there is no auto mapping available when we are using ExecuteReader. The second point is, in ExecuteReader, you are responsible for reading and processing the raw data from the iData reader. You can see here, we have just received the reader from the Dapper, and now it is our responsibility to read the reader and get the data from it. So this provides us very granular level control. We can decide how we want to process and what we want to process. Okay, but in case of unbuffered query, Dapper handles the mapping of the raw data and your specified object type. When you are using unbuffered query, you are not responsible to read the data and process that. That will be automatically handled by the Dapper. ExecuteReader is useful when you need maximum control. Because you have seen there are different type of parameters like transaction, command type. Using that, you have full control how you want to execute your query. So ExecuteReader provides us the maximum control over the data processing, or when you're working with the scenarios where Dapper object mapping is not required, right? So there could be some scenarios where object mapping is not required. In those cases, you can use ExecuteReader. Wherever unbuffered query is very useful when dealing with very large data set and you still want to ease the use of Dapper object mapping, right? So both of these types, right, they will execute in an unbuffered way, meaning we are having the benefit of having a memory efficient application. Okay guys, that's it for this video. In the next video, we will understand how we can execute stored procedures using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, we will understand how we can execute stored procedures with Dapper. For this demo, I have created some stored procedures. First one is get all employees. And if I execute this procedure, this will give me all the employees. Second procedure is get employee by ID. It is taking one parameter of integer type. And if I execute it like this, I will get the employee with the matching employee ID. Right, either I can provide the id parameter like this, or I can directly execute it like this also without specifying the parameter name. The third one is search employee by salary. Here I am taking two inputs, one is minimum salary and one is maximum salary, and I am returning only those employees whose salary is falling between this particular range, right? So if I execute this query by giving the minimum and maximum salary, I am getting 3 employees. Now let's see how we can execute these 3 procedures. So here you can see I have the connection string and I have created an SQL connection using this connection string. First, let's prepare the SQL statement. So I will specify the procedure name here, get all employees. And after this, what I can say connection dot query, and I will be using the generic type. So I will specify the employee type here, and within this I will pass the SQL query. And one more thing we need to do, we need to specify the command type. For that we can use the command type parameter and mention here command type dot stored procedure. Let's store this result in employees. After this, we can use a for each loop and print all the employees. Let's run this program. You can notice I am getting all the employees, and we have successfully executed this particular stored procedure. One other way to execute this is by using the execute keyword, because if you see in your database, right, we can execute the procedure by specifying the exec keyword, that is short form for execute. So let's try with this also. You will notice we will get a runtime error because exe space get employees is not a stored procedure, and we have specified the command type as a stored procedure here. So to resolve it, either you can remove this parameter from here and run the application. You will get the data back again. And what you can do, you can specify the command type as command text. So like this, I can specify the command type as text and run the application again. And I will again get the data back. Okay. So if you are using exe keyword, you need to make sure you are using the command type as text, or you need to make sure you are not specifying the command type as stored procedure. Now let's try to execute this particular stored procedure, that is get employee by ID. This will take one employee ID as parameter and return that particular employee. So if we execute this, I'm getting the Christopher Wilson. So coming back to the Visual Studio, this time I want to execute this procedure. So I will put this in my SQL. Let me change my command type back to stored procedure, because that is the best practice. You need to always specify which type of command you are trying to execute with Dapper, because based on this, Dapper can optimize your queries and improve the performance. Right. So we have specified the command type, but we need to specify one more thing here, and that is the parameter. Because if you remember, this is taking one ID parameter of integer type. So let's pass that. To pass parameter, what we can do, we can use dynamic parameters class. I have created an object of dynamic parameters and now I can add actual parameters in it. So I will say parameters dot add, and I want to add the ID parameter. So I will specify the ID parameter like this with @ symbol. And after this, I will pass the actual value that I want to pass for this parameter. So let me pass employee ID as 7, right? And because this will return me only one row, so what I can do, I can change this query to query first row default. Once that is done, let's change our for each loop also, because now we don't have a list of employees, we only have one employee in the result. Let's call it employee and remove the for each loop from here. One last step that we need to do, we need to pass this parameter to our query first row default method. So to do that, we have a parameter name with name param, and I can specify the parameters here, right? So this time I am passing three things. One is my SQL, that is my stored procedure name. Second one is the command type. I am telling the Dapper this is a stored procedure type of command. And the third one is the parameter which my stored procedure is expecting. Once that is done, let's run the application. You can see here we are getting the employee back, that is employee ID 7, Christopher Wilson. So this is how you can execute procedure with some parameter. So let's try one more thing. Let's try to execute the third procedure, that is search employee by salary, that is taking two parameters of decimal type. So let's copy the procedure name here and paste it here. Now I need to pass two parameters. One is minimum salary and second one is maximum salary. Pass the values also. If you hover over on these values, right, you can see by default it is taking this as an integer type. But if you notice here, right, the parameters are decimal. This will not give us any error, but it is better to tell the Dapper what is the data type available in the database. So in database, we have the data type as decimal. So let's specify that here by using the db type parameter. And I can specify here db type dot decimal. Let's do it for the second one also. SP will return multiple employees. So let's change it back to query. Right, and let's change the name to employees, and again use a for each loop and print the employee data like this and run the application. And as expected, we are getting three employees back, and these employees are having salary within this range, within the 90,000 and 100,000 range. That's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will continue our discussion and understand how we can execute different type of stored procedures in Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how we can execute stored procedures which are having a table valued parameter. I have this table employee, and you can see it is having these many records. And what I have done, I have created a table type. Table type is nothing but a type in database using which we can pass multiple result set to the procedure. So what I will do, I will take first name, last name and earnings in this table type, and I will use this table type in my procedure, that is create multiple employees. As the name suggests, this will create multiple employees in the database. So I'm taking all the employees in data variable, and this variable is of type employee data, and using this table type variable I am inserting into employee table. Now let's go to Visual Studio and understand how we can execute these kind of procedures. Okay, so I have opened up my Visual Studio. In order to execute procedures which are having a table valued parameter, what we need to do, we need to create a class that will represent that table type. So if you see in database, right, we have this table type. So let's create a class in C# that will be equivalent to this table type, meaning that will have the same properties as the column name which are defined here. Okay, so let's do that. So I will go to my Visual Studio. I will right click on my project and I will select add and I will click on class. I will name my class employee create request because using this class, we will be sending a request to the procedure to create multiple employees. So let's name the class as employee create request. Let's make it public and add the properties just like the columns we have in the table data type. So if we see the table data type, we have first name with F name, last name, and earnings. So let's add this in our C# class also. So I have added the three properties, first name, last name, and earning. Once that is done, let's go back to program.cs class. Here, let's create a list of employee create request. So I have added three objects and I have provided the first name, last name, and the earning of that employee. So we want to add these three employees to our employee table. So this was our step 2. Now the third step is we need to convert this employee data from list to a data table because Dapper can only understand data table. We cannot directly pass this list to Dapper functions. To convert this list to a data table, let's create an extension method. So first let's add a class. I will name this class as extension methods container because in this class we are going to add an extension method. Let's make it public and static. Once that is done, now let's our extension method. So this is my extension method and it will return a data table. I have created this as a generic because I want to use it for different type of lists. For example, I can also have a product create request, but I can use the same method for my that particular list also. So this extension method can handle any type of list because I have created this as a generic type. So I have specified two parameter here. First one is with this keyword because on this type of object, I will be able to invoke this method, right? And the second parameter is optional. We can specify the table name, meaning the data table name which we want to give. By default, I will be using the my table here. Now, let's create an object of data table. So I will say data table equal to new data table, and I can pass my table name in this constructor. Right? So this will create an instance of data table. So I have added a if check here. If the data is null or data.count is 0, then just return the table from here. No need to do any further processing. But if it is not the case, then we need to read the properties which are present in my type. Meaning in this case, I will be iterating through properties which are mentioned here. So to get the properties, we can invoke get properties method. So let's create a variable of properties. And let's get the type of T. And once we get the type of T, I can invoke get properties method from this. So this will give me three properties because I have specified three properties here. Now let's iterate through these properties and add columns to our data table based on the property names. So what I'm doing, I'm using this table variable which is of data table, and I'm accessing the columns property and I am adding a column here, and the name of the column will be same as the name of the property. And to specify the type of this column, I am using the type of the property. So to get the property type, I am using property dot property type, right? This will give us the type of the property, meaning if my property is of string type, this will give string there. Once that is done, meaning now we have our columns, now we need to add rows in our data table. To add the rows, let's iterate through the data which we are receiving here, because based on this data only, we need to insert rows in our data table. So let's again use a for each loop and create a data row. So I am using dot new row method to create a row. Now we need to iterate through these properties and add the row values, meaning we need to add the data in the cell, right? So let's do a for each loop here. Once we are here, let's say row, and access the cell by using the column name. Column name will be nothing but the property name, right? And in that cell, so I am accessing a cell here. So I'm using the row and specifying which column I want to access. So in this cell, I want to store the data. So to store the data, let's say, so what we are doing, we are using the get value method here, and we are getting the data which is available in this particular item, right? And adding that into that particular cell. And if that data is null here, right? So I am using this question mark operator. If the data is null here, I will be passing that db null dot value. So I'll be passing a null value to the database. And finally, after doing this, so I will be preparing one row here, and I will be adding this row back to our table. So I will say table dot rows dot add, where I will be adding this particular row, which is now having all the values which are available in our data. All right. So this is how I will be adding these rows. And finally, we can return our table. It is a complex process. So let's once again understand what we have done. First, we have created a data table. Okay. And then we have added the columns. Then we are adding rows. And finally, we are returning the table. Okay. So these are the steps. First step was creating the data table. Second step was creating the columns, and we have created the columns based on the properties that are available in our type T. In our case, that will be our employee create request. So these are the properties. So there will be 3 columns in our data table. And once we have the columns, we are adding the rows using the data which we are receiving here. And this data will be binded to the row cells here. And once the data is added, we are adding that row back to the table. Once our table is prepared, we are returning that table. Now our extension method is ready. Now we can come back to our program.cs and we can change this employee data to a data table. So let's do that. So I will say variable data table equal to employee data dot to data table, and I can specify the type here, that will be employee create request, and let's pass the table type also. So I will be specifying employee data, because if you see in the database, right, I have the type with employee data name. So that's why I'm naming my table also with employee data, and no need to specify the type here, because C# will understand the type from this object, because we are invoking this employee data on this list of employee create request. So this type will be automatically inferred here. So we can ignore this. Once that is done, now let's create a dynamic parameters object and add the parameter which we have just created, parameter dot add, and I will be specifying the name of the parameter as @data, because if you see in our procedure, the parameter name is @data here. And finally, I need to pass the value of this parameter, that is nothing but our data table. So data table, and I need to call as table valued parameter method. And within this, I need to say employee data. Once our parameters are ready, now we are ready to execute our store procedure. So on our connection object, we can call execute. And we need to pass 2 parameters here. First one is the procedure name, and second one is the parameters. So let's pass the parameter first. and let's copy the SP name from database. So this is my SP name. I will copy this and put it right here. So I have passed down my SP name, my parameters. Let's give the command type also. Okay. So I have specified the command type as stored procedure. Now we are ready to execute our code. Okay, before execution, let's see the rows in the employee table. So currently we have 10 rows, and after the execution, there should be 13 rows because these three employees we are trying to add in our database. Let's run our application. Okay, so our application ran successfully, and now let's check our database. Execute this query again, and now you can see we are getting three more rows, that is Mark, Scott, and Travis. And you can notice here, these were the employees that we have added from our C# code. So our program is working as expected. And this is how you can execute a stored procedure which is having a table type parameter. I know these steps are very tedious and bit complex, but let's recap what we have done. So this was the table type that was available in the database. So what we have done, we have created a class here that is matching the columns which are available in database, right? Once that is done, in the program.cs class, we have created a list of employee create request and added the data here. Once we have this list, we converted this list to a data table using two data table method that we have created as an extension method in our extension method container class. So we used this method to convert that list to a data table. Once we have our data table ready, now it's very simple. Now we just have to create a dynamic parameters object and add that parameter using the as table valued parameter method, right? And we need to specify the type here, right? This is the table type in the database, so we need to specify that here. Once it is done, we can execute our SP by specifying the SP name, the parameters, and the command type as stored procedure. So that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will understand how we can execute stored procedures which are having an output type parameter. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how we can execute stored procedures which are having an output parameter. I have created a stored procedure with name getEmployeeName by ID. It is expecting one parameter ID and it is having one output parameter name. So what will happen? This procedure will execute and it will set the value for this name parameter. If you can see here, the name is getting set with first name and last name. We are concatenating it with a space in between, right? So if I execute my procedure, so what I've done, I have created a variable result, and basically this result will be passed to the name parameter and I will be getting the value from this variable. So let's execute this and I can see I'm getting the complete name David Lee for the employee ID 3. Now let's go to Visual Studio and try to execute this using Dapper. Okay, so I have my SQL connection here which I've created using this connection string. Now the procedure is expecting two parameters. One is input parameter, that is ID, and second one is output parameter, that is name. So let's create an object of dynamic parameters and add these parameters into it. So I have created an object of dynamic parameter. So let's add the two parameters in this parameters dot add, and the first parameter is @ID, and let's pass the employee ID as 4 here. First parameter is added. Now let's add the second parameter, which is of output type. Okay, so I will say parameters dot add, and first I need to specify the name of the parameter, so that is nothing but @name. And the second thing that I will be mentioning here, that is value of this parameter. So let's pass that value as null. Okay, Now we need to set the direction of that parameter, because the direction of this parameter is output, right? So we need to specify the direction here using the direction parameter, and I will set it using system.data.parameter direction, and I will use the output direction. Okay, we can remove this system.data from here and import the namespace, that is system.data. Right, next thing that we should specify, that is the data type of this parameter. For that we can use db type parameter, and let's specify the value here using db type enum, and I will be specifying it as string. Once that is done, we need to specify one last thing, that is the size of this parameter. So let me specify the size using the size parameter, and I will be mentioning 255. And the size of this parameter can vary depending on the size of the data that you are expecting from this procedure. Now our parameters are ready. Let's execute the procedure now using these parameters. Again, to execute the procedure, I will use the connection, and I will use the execute method from the Dapper library. And first I will specify the SP name, and then I will specify the parameters. Okay, so let's copy the SP name from the database. This is my SP name. I'll put it here. So this procedure will execute, and this will set the data on the name parameter because it is an output parameter. So the name parameter should be having the value which we are expecting. Okay. To fetch the name parameter, I'll create a variable string name, and I will be getting it from parameters, and I will say parameters.get, and I will specify the type of data which I'm expecting. I'm expecting string data, and from which parameter I'm expecting it from the name parameter. So I will specify the @name here. That's it. Using this line, I will be fetching the data from my output parameter, which is nothing but name. At the end, let's print the result to make sure we are getting the correct data. Now let's run the program. As expected, we are getting the employee name Sarah Jones because we have passed down the employee ID as 4, and employee ID 4 is nothing but Sarah Jones. That's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will continue our discussion and we will see what are the other different type of parameters that we can pass to Dapper functions. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how Dapper parameters can protect us from SQL injection attacks. But first, let's understand how SQL injection attacks can be performed if we are not using parameters in Dapper. So basically, I have created a table users, and in this table, I will be keeping the users data. If I select this table, you can see this is having only username and password. Based on this username and password, we will be authenticating a user. Now let's see the Visual Studio setup also. Here again, I have created an SQL connection using this connection string, and I have written a very simple code. I am asking username and password from the user, and using that I will be creating an SQL query. And if you notice here, I am not using parameters. What I'm doing here, I'm directly passing the username and password to this SQL query and executing it on my database, right? And I'm using query first or default to execute this query, and I have created a simple class also to represent a user model. So it has the ID, username and password. If we don't find any user using this query, we will say you are not authorized, else we will greet the user and we will say hello, and we will print the username of that user. So first let's see if this application is working or not. So I will run my application. Right, so let's try with Christopher, and I will hit enter. It will ask me for a password. Then I will enter a valid password for the Christopher. And once that is done, I will get the message hello Christopher because I have provided a valid username and password. Let's try a negative scenario also. I'll rerun my application, and this time again I will give the username as Christopher, and I will give some wrong password, and I will hit on enter. I am getting the message you are not authorized. Basically our application is working fine, but let's suppose some hacker is trying to access our application. So what I will do, I will run my application again, and let's say I will enter any username. Let's say I will give some dumb username. So okay, right, so I have given some dummy username, and let me give some password. And here, while entering the password, I will try to inject some SQL. So basically I have entered this kind of SQL code here. Using this, the hacker can perform SQL injection. Let's see what will happen when I will hit enter. You see, when I hit enter, you can notice I am not getting that error message. Instead of that, I am getting this greeting message, hello John. So the hacker has successfully logged into our application. That happened because we were not using parameters, and because of that, hacker was able to do one SQL injection attack on our application, and hacker was able to log in to our application. Let's first understand how this happened. If I go to my SQL server, and I'll copy this query and I paste it here. So what hacker did, hacker passed down the username as dummy, right? And for the password, they have passed down some SQL string. Let me show you what they have passed down. So basically they have passed down this particular string. If I copy this string and put it in my password, you notice what happens. It will close this password where close here, and it will put an OR condition, and it says 1 equal to 1. Because it is a OR condition and this condition will always be true, when we execute this query, we'll get all the users, and out of which the John was selected, right? Because we are using query first or default in our C# program. So guys, this is how hacker can manipulate your SQL queries if you are not using parameters. If you are directly passing the data which is coming from the UI, hacker most probably is gonna log into your application without having valid credentials. So let's see how we can avoid this SQL injection attack by using parameters. It's very simple. Instead of passing down the username and password like this, what we need to do, we need to use dynamic parameter. So I will change my query like this. So I will be using @username @password here. Now I can create a dynamic parameter object and pass down username and password. So this is my dynamic parameters, and I'm passing down username and password here. And finally, when I'm executing query first or default, I will be passing these parameters here. Now let's try to do SQL injection again. Let's run the application. Again, I will pass some dummy username, and again I will try to do some SQL injection. So for the password, I will pass this string, and this time you can see SQL injection attack is not happening, and application is properly giving us this message, you are not authorized. That's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will see what are the other different ways to pass parameter to SQL queries. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand what are the different ways to pass parameters using Dapper. If you see in my database, I have this employee table, and when I'm executing this query, select start from employee where department is equal to sales and salary is greater than 62,000. When I execute this, I get two records. So basically here I am passing two parameters. One is sales and one is 62,000. Let's go to Visual Studio and try to execute this same query in Dapper. I have opened up my Visual Studio. So now let's create the SQL query here. So this is my SQL query. Here I am passing two parameters, department and salary. Now let's try to execute this. Okay, so I have created this SQL query and I'm executing this SQL query using the query method. And after that, I am iterating through the result and printing the first name of the employee that we have received here. Okay, but you can notice here, currently I'm not passing any value to my parameter. So now let's try to pass this parameter to this SQL query. One way is by using the dynamic parameter. For that, we need to create an instance of dynamic parameters. Once you have the instance, you can use parameters.add method to add the relevant parameters. So I have used the dynamic parameters and I have added the department and salary parameter, and I've also specified the value for those parameters, sales and 62,000. And finally, let's add this parameter to our query method. So after the query, I'll pass these parameters here. Now let's try to run the program. As expected, we have received the two employee names, that is Michael and Matthew. And if you see in the database, this was the same result that we were getting here. So our program is working as expected. So this was the first way to pass the parameter. Here we have used the dynamic parameter. Second way to pass the parameter is by using a dynamic object. So let's create a dynamic object. So I have created a dynamic object. Here I have passed the department and salary like this. Now let's run the application. And as expected, we have received the same result. So this is the second way to pass the parameters. The third way is by using a dictionary. So let's create an instance of dictionary and pass the data. Okay, so I have created a dictionary of string as the type of the key and object as the type of the value. And I have added two items in my dictionary. First is department and second one is salary. After doing this, what we can do, we can pass this dictionary to our dynamic parameter instance. So I have created an instance of dynamic parameters and I have passed the dictionary to this object. All right, and I am passing down this dynamic parameters to my execute method. Let's run the program again. And again, we are getting the same result. So this is the third way to pass the parameter. This method is useful when you have a lot of parameters, because using dictionary, you can add the parameters easily. And once your dictionary is ready, you can pass down that dictionary to the dynamic parameter collection. This way, your code will look more clean and more readable. The next way that we will discuss is by using a template. So we can create a template of employee object and pass down that to our dynamic parameters. Let me show you how. So what I have done, I have created an object of employee class and I have initialized the values here, department and salary. And I have passed down that template to my dynamic parameters. Let's try to run the application and see if we're getting the expected result. Again, we are getting the same result. Basically, the properties that I have initialized here, department and salary, will be passed down to this SQL query. Because of that, we will get the same result that we were getting before. So this is another way. Here we are passing template to our dynamic parameters, and using those dynamic parameters, we are executing the SQL query. Let's look at this particular query. Here we are executing this query and passing down this particular where clause where department in sales and IT. When I execute this query, I am getting all the employees who are belonging to sales and IT departments. To execute this kind of query, let's see what we can do. So I have changed my SQL query here and I have used this @depth names. Basically, using this parameter, I will be passing down the list of departments that I want to search. In this example, we are searching for sales and IT department. Okay, after this, let's first remove this piece of code. We can create a dynamic object So what I have done this time, I have created a dynamic array and I have added sales and IT in that array. Once that is done, what we can do, we can pass down this department names array to our query method. Let's see how. After SQL, I will say new and I will copy the parameter name which I'm giving here, that is department names, and I will put it equal to department names, which is nothing but our dynamic array which we have created here. After this, we can try to execute our program and see if it is working or not. So our program is running and we are receiving 5 records here. And if you notice in database also, there were 5 records that we were getting. So our program is working as expected. And that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will try to understand how we can execute SQL functions using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how we can execute SQL functions using Dapper. For this demo, I have created 2 functions. First function is a scalar type function. I have named it get highest earner by department. Basically, this function will take department name as an input and it will return the employee ID of the employee who is earning the most in that department. For example, if I see this employee table and if I see the IT department here, so I have 2 employees here who are working in IT department, employee ID 3 and employee ID 7. And from these two, employee ID 7, that is Christopher Wilson, is the one who is earning the most. So when I will be executing this function, let's say I will be executing this function by passing the department name as IT, I will be getting the employee ID as 7 because employee ID 7 is the one who is earning most in the IT department. Similarly, if I execute my function with sales as my parameter, I will get employee ID 9. Okay. So this is our scalar value function because it is returning a single value. Now let's go to Visual Studio and try to execute this function using Dapper. So I have opened up my Visual Studio and here I have created a connection using the connection string. Now the first step is to prepare our SQL query. And executing SQL function is very much similar as to execute the queries in SQL. Let me show you how. If you see here, when we are executing this function, we are using the select keyword and passing the parameter here. So we need to follow the same syntax in Dapper also. So let's copy this line and create an SQL query string here. And instead of passing the IT like this, I will be passing that as a parameter. So let me say department name. Once that is done, now let's create dynamic parameters and pass down this department name. So I have created an instance of dynamic parameters and I have passed down that value as IT. Now let's execute this query. So I have used the ExecuteScalar method and I'm using a generic type. So I have passed down the type here as integer because I will be expecting an employee ID in the response. And I'm passing the first parameter is the SQL query. Once we have written the result, let's print that using console.writeLine. Right. And execute this program. As expected, we are returning the employee ID 7 here, and if I change my employee ID here to, let's say, sales and rerun the program, I will get the employee ID as 9. So our program is working as expected, and this is how you can execute scalar value functions using Dapper. Now the next type of functions that we have is table valued function. Basically, instead of returning a single value, a table value function will return a set of rows. Here, when I was executing this scalar value function, I was getting one result, right? But let's look at this table value function. This is again taking the department name as the input parameter, and it will be returning all the employees who are working in that particular department. And it will return the employee ID, full name of the employee. That is nothing but the combination of first name and the last name separated by a single space. And the third column will be the salary. All right. So I'm getting all the data from that table, and I am filtering the data based on the department name that we are getting here. And based on this parameter, I will be fetching the data and inserting it into my data table, and finally returning from that function. Right. If I execute my function, let's say I will be passing marketing as my department name and execute this, I am getting 3 employees, and I'm getting all the related data also, that is employee ID, full name, and salary. If I change my department here to, let's say, IT department, and execute it here, I will be getting those 2 employees who are working in the IT department. Now let's again go back to Visual Studio and try to execute this table value function using Dapper. Again, we need to follow the same syntax which is given here. Again, this is similar to how we were executing the SQL queries. So I will be copying this and I will be pasting it here, and I will change it to the department name parameter. Right. Once that is done, let's create an instance of dynamic parameters. And pass down the value for the department name. And finally, let's execute this SQL query using the query method. So I have executed this query using the query method, and this time I'm not using the generic method. I will be using the non-generic method, and I will be getting the employees result in the employees variable. Now let's iterate through these employees and print out the result using console.writeLine. So for that, we can use a for each loop. Okay, so I am using the string interpolation, and I am printing the ID, full name, and the salary of the employees that we have received. Let's run the program and test it out. So the program is running, and I can see I am getting 2 employees here, and I'm also getting the ID, their full name, and the salary that they are earning. Now let's change the parameter to something else. Let's say marketing, and run the application again. This time I'm getting all the employees who are working in the marketing department. So our program is working as expected. And this is how you can execute the SQL functions using Dapper. Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how we can implement transactions using Dapper. But first, let's understand why do we need transactions. Let's take an example of this table. I have this table accounts. I have 2 rows here. Account ID 1, Alice, 800 is the balance. Right? Similarly, I have one more account here, account ID 2. Now, let's say I want to transfer money from account ID 1 to account ID 2. Okay, so how I will do it? First of all, I will remove the money that I want to transfer from account ID 1. So I will write update accounts, and I will set the balance. I will reduce 200, and then I will update 200, right? So if I execute these 2 queries, then transfer will happen properly, right? If I check my status of accounts now, this account got debited and this account got credited, right? So this is the normal scenario. This is the happy case. So this is the happy case where both of these statements executed without any issues. But in real world, there could be some issues when executing these statements. Let's see. Again, I want to perform the transaction. Let's say I want to debit 100 from this account, and I want to credit 100 into this account. But let's say someone has made some mistake while doing this update. or maybe something happen in between, right? Something can happen in between also. Let's say someone has declared a variable id int equal to, and they are setting it to abc. Okay, so we will get one error here, right? If I try to execute both of these statements now, you notice we have failed here, so the operation has terminated here. But because of this, what happened, now we have some invalid data in our account. Now this account got debited by 100, but because we faced the error here, we did not credited the second account. So this is not the correct behavior. Either both of these updates should complete successfully, or both of these should not happen, right? We should not have partial updates in this case, because if we do partial updates, it will create invalid record in our table, right? Just like we have here. So this account got debited, but this account was not credited. Now let's see how transactions can help us in this kind of scenario. Let's see what I'm doing here. I'm saying begin transaction, then I'm using a begin try block here, and at the end I have a catch block also. So we can use try catch block in SQL Server. And I'm executing the same statement, but this time I'm executing it within a transaction, right? So I will update this account, then some error will happen here, and then I'm trying to update the second account. So what will happen here, right? When we execute this first statement, error will occur here and we will fall back to the catch block. And in the catch block, we have written rollback transaction. And if we don't face any error, then we will do the commit transaction. Let's see the rollback case first, and then we'll explain the other scenario. Okay, first let's see the status. So currently I have 500 here and 700 here. Okay, now let's execute this piece of code. Now I'm trying to update the accounts, but I'm using the transactions. I will execute this. You see, one row is affected, but when doing the second update, I mean before doing the second update, we faced this error, conversion failed. That's why we will hit this rollback transaction. And if you notice the table now, we still have 500 and 700. Because of this rollback transaction, whatever was done by this statement will be rolled back. But in case there is no error, if I update these statements now, these will execute without any issue. And if I check my data, account has been debited with 200 here, and this account has been credited. So the transaction has been completed without any issues. So this is how you can use transaction to make sure either both statements are completing or none of the statements are completing. We are not allowed to make partial updates. Okay. So this is the whole idea. Now let's see how we can implement this using Dapper in C#. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. Here I have a simple console application and I'm creating a connection string, and then I'm creating my connection, then opening my connection. Then I have those two SQL queries, SQL1 and SQL2. Here we are debiting the account. Here we are crediting the account. And finally, I'm executing both of these SQLs, right? Let's check the current balances in the database. So if we check the current balance, we have 300 here, 900 here. Okay. Now, if I perform this right now, let's execute this. Okay. Application has ran and we have come out of it. It means the operation was successful. If I go back to my database and see the account now, right, we have 100 here and 1100 here. So the operation was successful. Let me update the account. Let me add here so that we will have some money, and let me update this also to 1000. Right, now let's say when doing this execution something happened in between, right? I will again simulate an error here, so I will just say throw new exception, right? And I can say here invalid. Now what will happen if I execute this, right? Remember we have account balances like this, 1100 and 2100 here. If I run my application now, Okay, application has been completed and we got the exception. So we have the exception here. Now go to database, and if I check the data here, now this guy got debited and this guy was not credited. This is again a partial update, so we should avoid this, right? So to avoid this, what we can do, we can make use of transaction. Now let's see how we can implement transactions here, and it is very simple. First of all, we need to use a using statement. So in the using statements, I need to say where transaction is equal to connection dot begin transaction. So I will begin my transaction here and I will start this block here. Okay, once it is done, I can move my code within this block. Okay, so all this will be part of this transaction. Now what is the next step? Next step, I need to use a try catch block because I should be able to roll back in case of any errors. So I'm writing a try catch block here and I will copy this code again and I will put it in my try block. Okay, and when executing these queries, right, I need to pass one more parameter. So I can pass transaction parameter here. So we will execute our commands using this transaction which we have created here. Similarly, for the second query also, I will use the transaction as my parameter, as my third parameter. Okay, once that is done, then you can do a commit here. You can commit your transaction like this, transaction.commit, and in the catch block you can say transaction.rollback. So you can roll back your changes in the catch block. Okay, and let's throw the error also from here. All right, so what is happening here? We are creating a transaction here, then we are writing these two SQLs. We are preparing these two SQL for the debiting and the crediting of the amount. Then we are executing these queries, but we are passing this transaction parameter also. And if both of these are successful, then we will commit it, else we will do a rollback. If I run my program now, let's see the status in the database. What are the current account? We have 700 here and 2300 here. Let's run the program. So this time no error has occurred and we should have our accounts updated properly. So this account got debited, this account got credited. But let's say there is some error here. Let's say I will simulate the error like this. I will change this balance here. Let's say someone tries to update the balance with ABC. So this is an invalid data. When trying to update this account, we will get the error. Now let's see what will happen. When I run my program, I will get the exception. So we are not able to convert this ABC to numeric, right? So we got the exception here. If I press continue here, we will go to catch block and we will roll back the changes. So there should not be any changes to any of these accounts. So if I check the account again, I still have 500 and 2500 here, right? So there are no partial updates in this case. So again, look at what we have done here. We have created the transaction here. Then we have used this transaction when doing the execute. So basically as part of this method, we can pass transaction, and we have passed the transaction for the second SQL query also. And if the queries are successful, then we are doing a commit. But if in case any error occurred, then we are doing a rollback here, right? So this is how you can implement transactions using Dapper in C#.